Okay, it's part two of my high school memories, and this part I'm gonna focus on tough guys and girls that I have encountered in my classrooms, schools, really over the years. I'm gonna start by going all the way back to high school, 1972, senior year in high school, at lunch. In the cafeteria at Holy Cross High School. I had lunch daily with a couple of guys. We ate together all the time, and one of them was a pretty tough guy actually, by the name of Blaise Pascal. Now, his name wasn't really Blaise. His name was actually Bob Pascal. But ever since sophomore year, he was known as Blaise Pascal. He was dubbed that by our sophomore Latin teacher, Brother Gilroy, when he was calling the roll, and he called the roll and said, Robert Pascal. And he said, oh, Pascal, your patron saint must be Blaise Pascal. The patron saint of throat diseases. And we used to go, I guess, once a year to church, and we would get the candles and we would be blessed on St. Blaise Day. So from that point on, and not only did Brother Gilroy call him Blaise in class, we all called him Blaise, and pretty soon everybody called him Blaise. He was no longer Robert. He was Blaise Pascal. And he was a pretty tough guy. No question about it. You didn't fool with Blaise. And of course, I was smart enough to make friends with Blaise because he was, in fact, a pretty tough guy. So we're having lunch in the cafeteria, me and Blaise and Richie Ramirez, a good friend of mine, this another friend, Kevin Zaleski. Kevin Zaleski would say the same kind of dumb joke, I guess you'd call it, almost every day. He'd open up his lunch and say, ooh, a hot scab sandwich and a cold glass of pus. And he thought this was very funny. It wore a little thin, let's say. But he ate lunch with us. And then also was my very good friend, and we've remained friends really to this day, Chris Albertine. Now, Chris Albertine was not what you would call a tough guy, uh, nor was I, as a matter of fact. So we're all sitting at lunch, and Chris comes. He's the last guy to get to the table. Chris goes to sit down, and Blaise was sitting next to him, grabs his chair and yanks his chair out. Chris goes down hard, and of course, we're all laughing. This was very funny. Chris didn't see any humor in this, and I'm looking at him, and he is really angry. And he leaps up, and he's got this look of, I'm going to kill somebody. And he's looking at Blaise, and I'm thinking to myself, what in the world is he going to do? He's got really two choices. It could be a tongue lashing, which I figured that was what was going to be coming, or, he could take a swing at him, which would be like suicide. So Chris gets up and he balls up his fist. I said, oh my God, he's going to hit him. And he starts pounding. I mean, boom, 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 pounding Blaise Pascal's 3-pack of Linden chocolate chip cookies, the go-to cookie for high school students since 1934. He just pounds it into like crumbs. And we're all sitting kind of shocked. And then we all start laughing. But then we look at Blaise, because now Blaise, he's got to respond to this in some way. Can't let this go without responding. So Blaise simply does this. He picks up his cookies like this and just says, my cookies. And that diffused the whole situation. And that was the end of it. But Chris made a statement that day that was very clear to all of us. If you're gonna mess with Albertine, you better hold on to your cookies, because he might be coming for them. So that was back in high school. That was 1972, and that was Blaise Pascal. I'm now going to move on to 1976, when I was a senior in college now. So we're 4 years later. And I'm student teaching. as I talked about that first student teaching lesson before that lasted a total of 5 minutes. But now I'm a few weeks in. I'm pretty comfortable with what I'm doing. My cooperating teacher, John Pumari, sees me in the morning on this particular day and says, my back is killing me. I got to go lay down in the office for a period or two. He said, "Don't worry. Do your first period class like you normally do. You'll be fine. Just go teach. Just go teach the class." So, okay, I felt pretty confident. Fine. So now I'm going to go and teach for the first time with no professional supervision in the room. So it was a ninth grade social studies class, global studies, and we were studying about ancient Egypt. So I asked what I thought was a pretty innocuous question. I asked the class, "What's a sarcophagus?" And a bunch of hands shoot up, and one kid in the back, we'll call him Jimmy, just kind of calls out, "Charlie Wang's mother." Oh, everybody starts laughing, except for Charlie Wang, who did not see the humor in this at all. So Charlie jumps out of his seat. He was sitting kind of toward the front of the room in the middle, and Jimmy was sitting all the way in the back of the room in the same row as Charlie. Charlie goes charging back and starts strangling Jimmy. The class, you can imagine, it's just pandemonium. Kids are screaming, "Fight, fight!" And I'm in the front of the room, and I'm like, "Oh my God, now what the hell am I supposed to do?" So I just scream out to everybody, "Turn around and be quiet." And then I was amazed because they all turned around and they were quiet while this was going on in the back. So I felt pretty good. Okay, they actually listened to me. Remember, this was a first. So then I realized I got to go back there. I got to do something because Charlie is strangling Jimmy. So I kind of get a bear hug on Charlie to pull him off, but his hands are like right around his throat. So I had to pry his fingers off his throat, then grab him and bring him back to his seat, and sit him down and say, just stay here. And then I look to the back, and there's Jimmy, and Jimmy's he's still gasping. He's still gasping for air. And I go back, not to see how he is, but to yell at him for insulting Charlie's mother. And you can't do something like that. What's wrong? How do you do so? And I'm going on and on screaming at this poor kid as he's starting to get the color back in his face, and he's gasping for air. So at that moment, in my mind anyway, at that time, I believe that insulting someone's mother was a greater offense than attempted murder, which is what Charlie was doing, because Charlie didn't get into any trouble at all. Charlie was fine. So then we go back. The lesson continues. Everything goes smoothly, and I see my cooperating teacher the next period, or 2 periods later, I guess it was. We had a free period in between. He says, "How did it go?" I said, "Oh, no problem. It went fine." So I have never ever since that day asked a class the question, what is a sarcophagus? Because the first time I asked it, it didn't go so well. All right. Also, when I was student teaching, I had the opportunity to cover a class, which again, never done that, had never done that before. One of these social studies teachers was going to be absent, and so we were told when we came in and found out he was absent. There was about 4 of us who were student teaching. We were each given a class to cover, one of his classes to cover that period, that day. So my period to cover came up, so I go over to his class. There were all ninth graders in the building, so it's a class of 34, ninth grade kids. And I'm a sub, so I walk in, and imagine it's a substitute teacher and a freshman in a freshman class. Not only a substitute teacher, but it's this young guy, student teacher, and so nobody's paying. I'm trying to teach. Nobody's paying attention. I'm trying to get them settled down, and it's like these kids are just ignoring me. So this big kid stands up. I mean, we'll call him Enrique. He big kid. He stands up And I mean, he looked like a man. He didn't look like a 14-year-old. And I'm thinking, oh God, what is he gonna do? And he says to the class, he says, "Hey, this man is trying to teach us something. We all have to listen." And then he sits down, and everybody's quiet. Thank you very much. So then I continued with the lesson. The same thing I was teaching to my other classes, because they're all pretty much in the same spot. And it went well, thanks to Enrique. No thanks to me. He's the one that got the class in order. So the next day, we're having lunch as we normally did in the faculty cafeteria, and all the social studies teachers kind of sitting together having lunch. And the teacher who was absent, he says, "Hey, you know what? In only one class yesterday did the kids learn anything, and that was in your class." He points to me, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's really great." And I'm thinking, it wasn't me. It was this kid Enrique who stood up and got the class in order. So he was a tough kid, but again, he was he was a good kid, not a problem actually. He was quite beneficial to me. So that was student teaching. I go from student teaching to Dominican commercial. I don't have any stories about tough guys or girls at the all girls Catholic high school, Dominican commercial, and then I go to St. Mary's Boys High School in Manhasset, and there it's a kind of an interesting experience. Uh, when I was interviewing for the job, one of the administrators who interviewed me was Brother Roy. And Brother Roy was the dean of discipline, as he was called at St. Mary's. And one of the questions he asked me, very pointedly, he said, "Would you ever hit a student?" I said, "No, I would never hit a student." Even though I came from a Catholic high school, Holy Cross High School, where kids were hit routinely in my school. In fact, I had a kid. I'll never forget this, in a ninth grade social studies class that was taught by a phys ed teacher and basketball coach and baseball coach. He would give us a test every Friday, and then every Monday he'd give back the test. And the way he gave back the test is he walked around the room and and handed you your test paper. And if you failed, he beat you up. Not just like give you a little smack in the back of the head or something, do better next time. No, he beat you up. You were on the floor, out of your desk. You were just beaten. And this kid who sat across from me, Murphy, failed. He seemed like he failed every test. And on every Monday, poor Murphy got beat up in social studies class. So I got, straight A's in freshman social studies. I don't remember what we learned about, but I guess it was Afro-Asian cultures, which I ended up teaching at Dominican Commercial. Anyway, I digress. So no, brother, I would never ever hit a student, and I never did, and I never have. But it wasn't unusual in those days. This was 1981 for that to happen. Oh, excuse me, this was 1979 when I started at St. Mary's. So I get the job, and the first week of class, I'm walking to class, and then I see Brother Roy in the crowded hallway in between periods. And he must have done this intentionally. He picked out the biggest senior in the hallway and started screaming at him for I don't know what. I don't know what this kid did, but he was getting screamed at by Brother Roy. And Brother Roy kept pushing his finger into his chest, pounding it, and the kid is banging up against the lockers. And Roy is making this spectacle of, don't mess with me. You get in trouble with me, it's going to be bad. Okay, so a few days later, I'm teaching a ninth grade class, and it's September, so it's warm. I got the windows open, I have the door open, we're getting some airflow into the room. And here comes Brother Roy, and he just stands in the open doorway. Doesn't come into the classroom, just stands in the open doorway. And he wore clerical robes, so he would roll up the sleeves, fold his arms, tough look on his face, and just staring. At first, I got scared. I thought I had done something wrong, and he was coming after me. But He was just letting the freshmen know in no uncertain terms that he's Brother Roy and you don't ever want to mess with me. And then he was there for, I don't know, a minute, 2 minutes, and then he left, and I guess he went to intimidate some, some other classroom. So fast forward now, we're several months into the school year. And in between classes in those days, I was a heavy smoker. I would run to the faculty room, get a couple drags on a cigarette, then I would get to class. Pretty much the kids were already in. At St. Mary's, they had a hard and fast rule. You had to be in your seat when the bell rang. If you weren't in your seat when the bell rang, you were late to class. You send you down to the office. You got a late detention. You had to stay after school for half an hour for being late. So the kids were always in class before the bell rang. So the bell had already rung. The kids are in class, and I'm walking, and it has these side lights, I guess you'd call them, alongside the doors. So glass, so you could kind of look in. And I look in, and I see this kid, Big Ed, ninth grader, but he was big. He was a big, heavy kid who wanted to be I guess he saw himself as like a class clown, but in my view, his material wasn't so good. I didn't think he was all that funny. But in any event, there he was in front of the room, and I see him. He pulls out the chair to the desk, and the desks they were high desks with like bar stool type chairs. So when you sat down, you were above the class, and you could I kind of guess command the room a little bit better, or whatever the thinking was. So there was Ed, and he's got my chair out, and he goes into his mouth and he takes out this wad of just juicy bubblegum, a big wad, and he sticks it right on the middle of the seat of my chair. And everybody's looking like, ooh. And then he slides the chair back under the desk, and then he scurries off to his seat. And okay, then everybody's just sitting there. So then I open up the door and I come in. And so now you got these 30 or however many, 35, however many kids that were in there, all boys, 14, 15-year-old boys, and they're all sitting like at the edge of their seats looking at me. Okay, so I made it like I didn't know anything. So I would do the same thing every time. I would come into the class. I carried a briefcase in those days. I'd put the briefcase up on the desk. I'd pull out my chair and I would sit down and then, get the stuff out of the briefcase and start the class. So I walk in, I put the briefcase on top of the desk. I pull out the chair, and the kids are like, ooh, they're like lurching forward as I'm pulling out the chair. And then I go like I'm going to sit in the chair, and they're all like, ah. And then I stop, and I say, Ed, come on up. And he's like, everybody's like, oh. And Ed is like, what? I said, no, Ed, what's the matter? Just come up. So he gets up and he walks up. I don't know if he's sure that I knew or what was going on, but he's coming to the front of the room. I pull out the chair. I don't look down at it. I just look at Ed and I said, Ed, have a seat. And he said, oh, no. I said, what do you mean no? I said, have a seat. He says, no, I'm not going to sit in that. No. I said, Ed, I'll give you a choice. You could have a seat, or you can go down to Brother Roy's office, and you could explain to Brother Roy how that big wad of gum got on my chair. And everybody's like, oh. So now Ed's got a decision. He goes see Brother Roy. He's gonna get beaten, suspended. Who knows what's gonna happen to him? Or he could just sit in the gum. So he thinks about it for about 2 seconds, and he sits right on the chair. The class, you can imagine, these kids are going nuts. And he sits, and you hear it kind of like squish. And then I said, okay, Ed, get up. And he gets up, and the gum is like, wah. So there's Ed with a big wad of gum on it. Half of it's on his pants. Half of it's still on the chair. I said, okay, Ed, now you're going to clean my chair. And then I'll let you go to the bathroom and see if you can get the gum off your pants. So now, years later, it kind of dawned on me that the whole class, I should have really have punished the entire class because they all knew what was going on, and nobody warned me. Nobody said, "Mr. Scarnati, don't sit down." Nobody said that. They all just sat there hoping that I would get gum all over my pants. So that was Big Ed, not a tough guy. Roy was the tough guy. Big Ed was the kind of big goofy guy who got a wad of gum, his own gum, on his pants. So that was at St. Mary's Boys High School back in 19. I guess by the time that happened, it must have been 19. It was my first year there, so I guess it was the spring of 1980. All right, so now I was at St. Mary's for a number of years, and then I got a job at Newtown High School. So now I'm at Newtown High School, and at Newtown High, my first day at Newtown High School, I'm in the elevator going up to the social studies department, and the chairman of the social studies department is there as well. I had not met him before. I was interviewed by the principal, not by the chairperson. And so his name was Al McMullen, terrific guy, one of the best department heads I'd ever worked with, one of the best administrators I ever worked with. But we're on the elevator. He says, "Tony." He introduces himself, and I says, "Tony, I gave you the repeater classes." I didn't even know what that meant. Repeater classes. He said, "Yeah, these are the ninth grade classes, ninth grade global, but the kids in it have all failed ninth grade global at least once. Some of them have failed it, multiple times." And he said, "And I gave these classes to you because you're an experienced man. Anybody else, these kids would have just eaten alive." I said, "Oh, thanks a lot. I appreciate that." So they were fine. The kids were terrific. There was no issue. These kids were really nice. They just, they were not what you would call top students, let's say. But they were older. A lot of them were 16, 17, 18 years old in a ninth grade class. So it's later in the year. I guess it's the spring semester of my first year there. So that would put us at 1987. And we're about halfway into the spring semester, and I'm about 10 minutes into my last period class when the door just kind of flies open, the front door to the classroom, and it bangs against the chalkboard, which was in front, and in comes this kid. I don't remember I'll call him Hakeem. He comes in and he's got this scowl on his face. And he's got his admit form, and he just like slaps it onto my desk. And I'm looking at him, and he's like scowling. And I said, "Well, there's a seat in the back. You could sit back there." And he's got some books in his hand. He walks back to the seat. I should say he struts back to the seat. He takes his books and he slams them on the desktop. And then he plops himself into the seat, and there he sits. So now, the class, there was about, this was Newtown High School, so you had 34 kids on register because that was the limit at New York City public high schools in those days. But you never had 34 in the afternoon classes. You had 15 to 20 at most. And they were all different kids. They would kind of rotate in. It was a kind of a strange thing. So I had about 15 or 20 kids, and they're all watching him, and I could see them. Their eyes are all focused on this kid, and they're kind of following him as he moves to the back of the room, and then he plops himself down. And then they all turn, and now they're looking at me. What am I going to do? So obviously, Hakeem was looking for some type of a confrontation. That's what it seemed like to me. Like he wanted me to, I don't know, yell at him or tell him something or other. I don't know. It looked like he wanted a confrontation. He wanted to establish himself as the alpha male in the room. So I'm looking at the kids, and their eyes go back, and their eyes come forward, and they're all staring at me. And I just started laughing because I thought it was a pretty funny. I thought it was a pretty funny scene. This kid trying to be tough. The kids all want me to. How is he going to react? So I just started laughing. And as soon as I started laughing, the whole class started laughing. And then Hakeem was like, he went from sitting there like a tough guy to sitting up straight, and this didn't go the way he wanted it to go, which was the way I wanted it to go, certainly. So no issue with him. Over the coming weeks, he's in class every day. He's in class on time. He's participating in class. He was terrific. He's a terrific kid. I don't know why he had this notion that he had to be the top. I guess because he was also new to the school, so that might have had something to do with it. But after about 4 or 5 weeks, he stopped coming to class. And then I find out from a friend of mine who was a math teacher at Newtown, who I had lunch with. Uh, she said that she had him in class, uh, and he got into some kind of a trouble in her class or something. I forget exactly what transpired, but he came up to her desk, took out a knife, and put the knife right into the teacher's desk. Not good. So Hakeem got arrested, and then what they did in the I don't know if they still do it, but in the city schools in those days, if a kid got thrown out of one school because for behavioral reasons, I mean, you're legally entitled to be educated. So they would just send that kid to another school, and so you had these kids kind of shifting around. And I guess that's why he transferred in the middle of the semester. He probably got bounced out of some other school. I never asked him, I never asked him why. But that was Hakeem. So he had his issues, no question about it. But in my class, after after the first day, he was uh, he was pretty good. Also, now my second year at Newtown, I had another incident in my class. Again, it was another afternoon class, repeaters, right? So these were all, taking ninth grade class, but none of them were freshmen. They were all sophomores, juniors, maybe seniors. Although we called them that. If a kid didn't accumulate any credits, they might have been in school for 4 years, and we said they were senior. We called them a senior, but technically they weren't seniors. They were still freshmen because unless you accumulate credits, you don't move on. So unlike the two students that I taught at Dominican Commercial and St. Mary's, and then later at Townsend Harris, and then at Jericho, where school was kind of like a linear thing. You spent the 1 year as a freshman, 1 year as a sophomore, 1 year as a junior, 1 year as a senior, then you graduated. At Newtown, that was not the case. In the typical city school, that was not the case. You had to accumulate credits. So I had this class in the afternoon, and it was a kind of a rambunctious group. I guess you'd say. I'd come into class, and it would take me a minute or two to get them always to settle down. And then I discovered a very simple lesson. I was free the period before that, and that room was empty the period before, so I would go in there and I would do some work in that room. But one of the first things I did when I got into the room was I straightened out all the desks. They were sitting at tables, 2x2s. So I had however many rows I had set up. 4 rows. I 4 rows of these desks, so you have 8 rows of kids, and I put them nice and straight and neat. And when the kids came in, after I had done that, there was no issue getting them settled in because they just sat down where they're supposed to sit, and everything was nice and neat, and the kids were good. So that was a nice little technique that took me a while to figure out. That a neat room, you want kids to be orderly, give them an orderly room. That might help. In any event, so I'm in class, and the first 2 rows are the rows up against. I always call the first 2 rows the rows that are up against the wall where the doors are, and then the last rows are the ones over by the window. So sitting in these first 2 rows, in the second row, second seat, and the first row, third seat. So they're like kind of catty corner from each other. I had 2 girls. One girl I'll call Angie. I don't remember their names. One girl I'll call Angie. And she was a very kind of tough looking Hispanic girl. Nice. They're all nice. I mean, nice kid. But she had this kind of toughness about her. And then the girl in the first row, third seat, sitting catty corner, I'll call her Asha. I don't remember her name either, but she was a South Asian girl, little girl, very petite, soft spoken, dressed in pink with the bow in the hair and the whole bit. I mean, as kind of frou girly as you can get. And so one day we're in class, and I'm standing in between the second and third rows in the front of the room, and I'm going on about whatever the lesson was about. And Asha says to Angie, "You're a," and I won't say the word because it's pretty disgusting, but let's just say it rhymes with runt. And I was shocked, and Angie turns to Asha and says, "You call me that again, I'll kill you." And I'm, "Hey, girls, please, you can't. What are you doing, Asha? You can't use that word in call that calls. You shouldn't call somebody that in any setting, but least of all in a classroom. And Angie, you can't threaten to kill somebody. I can't believe I'm saying this. You can't threaten to kill somebody. That's not a good thing, especially in class. I'll have no murders in my class." So I thought I kind of handled it, diffused the situation. I didn't know what was going on between the two of them that would lead Asha to say that to Angie. But seconds later, I mean, less than 10 seconds later, Asha does it again. And true to her word, Angie leaps across the desks and just starts hitting this kid. And pandemonium in the classroom. I don't even bother trying to settle down the group. I got to get Angie off of Asha because she's really gonna hurt her. And I go over and wait a minute. This isn't like Charlie where I could just get the bear hug and pull him away. This is a girl, and I got to be careful where my hands end up. And I'm like, oh God. So first thing I tell the two kids sitting in front. I said one kid to go right to the phone, call security. I tell another kid to go out and see if you can find a security guard. And so I kind of try to pry Angie's hands off a little bit so I can slide myself in between the two and then move Angie away. And within 2 minutes or so, through the door comes two security guards and a dean. And the each security guard grabs one of the girls, and they take them out of the room. The dean asked me what happened. I explained to the dean what had transpired. So he takes them away. But man, it was a hairy kind of a situation. And then the next day, I'm in the room the period before, getting ready. Asha's father walks into the room. I don't know how he got in, but he walks into the room, and he said, "Mr. Scarnati, what happened here yesterday? I want to hear it from you, because I'm hearing one thing from the dean, and Asha is telling me something very different. So I want to hear from you what transpired." So I told him exactly what happened. He was mortified that this happened, and he said, "Mr. Scarnati, I apologize, and I promise you that will never happen again." And fine, no problem. And he was right. Asha came back to class, next day. Well, they were suspended for, I don't know, a couple of days or something. They came back, and then everything went as it should. But that was a kind of a shock to me. On a similar vein, with girls fighting, after I left Newtown, I went to Holy Trinity High School, co-ed Catholic high school in Hicksville, where I was the dean. And apparently, before I got to Holy Trinity, the principal told me that it was like the Wild West, where there were fights a couple times a week in the building. So they had passed a rule saying that if you fight, whether you started it or not, if you fought, you were automatically expelled. No suspensions, no discussions. You got involved in a fight, you're expelled. So consequently, there were really no fights. But about halfway through the year, there was a fight, and it was two girls. So I was the dean. So now I have one of the girls who was in the fight in the room, and she was the one who they said started the fight. I'll call her Mary, the black girl. I don't again. I don't know what her name was. I said, Mary, what happened? Why did you hit her? And she looks at me. She said, well, I had to. I said, why did you have to? She said, well, she took out her teeth, so I knew I had to hit her. What? What do you mean she took out her teeth? She took out her teeth. You know, she had the gold teeth in the front, and she took them out. And once you take out your teeth, that means you're getting ready to fight, because that's why you take your teeth out, because you don't want your teeth to get broken. It was these gold caps that they popped onto the front of their front teeth. They called them grills. I had never heard this. So uh, Mary was, I said, well, it really, you know the rule, Mary, it doesn't really matter if she took out her teeth or not. That's no cause. So Mary was expelled. The other girl took out her teeth and got beat up. She didn't, because she didn't fight back. She didn't fight back, so she was okay. But she took out her teeth, so I had to hit her, obviously. Okay, if you say so. Those are the only instances where girls were involved in fights that I knew of in the schools I was at. Go back to Newtown High School. My second and last year at Newtown High School, spring semester, afternoon class. It's late in the year. It's May, maybe even June. I'm showing a film in class, as socialist teachers certainly like to do. I'm showing a film in class, and I got the doors open. There were two sets of doors at Newtown, and front and back. And I had the windows open. Had these big windows. You know, Newtown is one of those old buildings that ventilation was really pretty good. It had these huge windows that you could open top and bottom. You know, the window pole. You had to take them down from the top. So I had the windows open, top and bottom, both doors open. The air is flowing. The room is hot, but it's got some airflow, so it's pretty comfortable. And the kids are watching a movie. I'm sitting in the back of the room, and then I see these two kids come to the front door. Two little Hispanic kids. They come to the front door of the classroom, and like Brother Roy did all those years ago, they were just standing in the doorway, and they got their arms crossed, and they're kind of bopping like this with scowls on their faces, trying to look tough, I guess, trying to look like menacing. All right, so I see them. The class didn't notice them at first, so I'm looking. So at some point, I'm going to have to get these two clowns out of the doorway. What are they going to do? What kind of issue is this now going to create? All these things go through your head when you're a teacher and you're trying to maintain order in your classroom. So I'm about to go to the door to tell them to get lost, and these two pigeons appear, and they land and they perch on one of the upper windows that's open on this I got the sash, I guess you would call it, on the frame, and they just perched right there, and they're pigeons. So what do pigeons do? They do this, right? With the heads and neck sticking out. So I got these two jokers in the doorway going like this. I got the two pigeons, doing this. So I said, "Hey, everybody, take a look." And I point to the pigeons, and everybody sees the pigeons. And I said, "Take a look." And the two kids doing the same thing, and the class starts roaring hysterically. And those two guys they just ran off, and I never saw those two jokers again. But it was the timing of the pigeons. I looked at the pigeons after those kids ran away. The pigeons just almost like they gave me a nod. We got you, and they took off. So those guys, I guess they thought they were tough. They thought they could look kind of menacing. But again, I don't know. I don't know what their plan was, what their goal was. If there was somebody in the room that they were trying to send a message to, or if they were just doing whatever. Who knows? Uh, so I go from Newtown to August Martin, where I had Mary and the girl took out her teeth. And then I go from August Martin, excuse me, from Holy Trinity to Townsend Harris, where I had no issues with with tough kids at Townsend Harris, nor did I at Jericho either. But I went in between those two stints I had at Newtown at Townsend Harris High School. I did 1 year at August Martin High School. And August Martin High School was in South Jamaica, Queens, all black school. Kids were great. Uh, and one day, it's in the early spring semester, so it's the winter, it's like February. And I'm going to my car after school. I had stayed in school to do some work, so it's a little bit late and it's just starting to get dark, like 4:30 in the afternoon. And I'm walking to my car, and the cars we were all parked on. We didn't have a parking lot. We just parked on the street. So I was parked on the street next to the building. And I'm walking to my car. I get in, and I look through the windshield, and there's this kid in the street, big kid. I mean, I didn't know it was a kid. I thought it was a man. A big guy. I'm talking like 6'3", 260 pounds, big guy. He's got his hood up. Because it's cold out, but a little implicit bias. I see a big black guy with a hood up, and I say, well, this could be trouble. Uh, and he's walking down the streets. I don't really think too much of it. I'm just kind of glad I'm in my car already. I got the door locked and started up the car. He comes right over to my car, and he knocks on the driver's window. So I roll down the window. I think I had to roll it down. I think I still had a crank. This is 19. What would this be? This would be 1991, like February 91. So I look at him and I say, yeah. And he looks at me and says, Scarnati? Jesus. I said, yeah. Yeah, that's who I am. And he said, I'll be in your class first period tomorrow morning. And I said, okay, I'll save you a seat. And he takes off. I roll up my window and go. Next morning, and this is now we're a month at least into the spring semester. There he is. He comes. He's in my first period. I had a senior economics class, and there he is. And true to my word, I saved him a seat right up front, right in front of my desk. I said, "There you go. There's your seat." And he sits down. And then I talk to him after class. I say, "Why are you coming in now? You had no admit stuff." He says, "Well, I've been on your roster the whole time. I never realized it. I just was marking kids, the whole bunch of kids that never showed up. They never showed up. I didn't think they were still on the roster." So I said, "So why are you here now?" He said, "Well, I talked to coach came to see me." I said, "What coach?" And he said, the football coach. He was a football player. He said, "Coach came to see me. And he said, he saw that I wasn't coming to your class. And he said, if you don't pass economics, you don't graduate. And if you don't go to class, you're not going to pass economics. And if you don't graduate, that football scholarship, I forget where he went. It wasn't a major school, but it was a smaller school. That football scholarship, if you don't graduate, that football scholarship disappears. So if you want that scholarship, you want to play ball next year, you want to play college ball next year, you better make sure you get to class." And so he did. And he was a big guy. He was like an offensive lineman, this kid. Nicest kid. You talk about you can't judge a book by the cover. This would be your prime example of that. And just as a kind of a side point, uh, from time to time when budgets get tight in the city, people talk about, well, might have to cut back on the PSAL, the Public School Athletic League, because that's expensive to run all those teams. It will be a foolish thing, because that's the most effective dropout prevention program that they have in New York City is, in fact, the athletic program. Because these kids, in order to play ball, you have to pass a certain number of your classes, including gym. You got to pass a certain number of your classes. Certainly got to pass your major classes to kind of keep you on track to graduate. And it was a terrific thing. If it wasn't for that, this kid never would have gotten through school. So he would look like a tough guy, but not well, maybe he was tough. I don't know, but he was the nicest kid. He was a wonderful kid in class. So that's it. That's my stories of tough guys. Next week, I think the topic I'm going to talk about is something that everybody kind of interested in: fashion. Uh, look at some anecdotes about fashion. But at right now, I'm gonna take off and have me a 3-pack of Linden chocolate chip cookies, the go-to cookie for high school students since 1934. So get yourself some cookies and milk and have a nice time. And I'll see you next week. Oh, and remember, uh, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel where all my videos eventually are going to be, and there might even be some bonus content that I put up there. I'm not too sure about that. Have a nice weekend. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.